Hi there. Welcome to SailPoint's presentation of their identity governance platform. I'll be your host today. My name is Donovan Blaylock, and I'm a technology evangelist here at SailPoint. As we see organizations go through digital transformations to help improve their business, we're seeing them introduce a lot of new applications, which ultimately adds risk. Your team is probably challenged with effectively managing risk associated with users across a lot of technologies. You have hundreds, if not thousands, of applications, either on-premise or in the cloud. You have terabytes, if not petabytes, of data spread everywhere. This is an extremely complex problem. SailPoint helps you solve these complex problems by answering these basic questions. Who has access? Who should have access? How was that access being used? And can you prove it to the auditors? By being able to answer these questions, will help you enable the business while reducing your risk and becoming more secure and efficient along the way. SailPoint's identity governance platform was architected for the cloud and gives you visibility across all users' applications and data. From this point on, I'm going to kind of focus on some common things we hear when we're talking to customers and prospective customers. These are things that are almost every meeting that we have. A big one, of course, is digital transformation, as I mentioned before. As organizations go down the digital transformation path, ensuring that you take an identity-focused governance and security approach is key to making sure that you protect the enterprise. We'll show you some examples of this inside the demo. We're also often required to show our ability to help in the lack of visibility. A centralized location that shows who has access to what and the history of that access is often a pie in the sky to most organizations prior to having identity governance. We're going to show you what that looks like, how it operates, and show you some common things people use that for here in the demonstration a little bit later. Obviously, some very inefficient and costly processes around getting that access. Onboarding employees, moving employees, changing the employee type. All those functions are typically manual in organizations prior to having identity governance. We're going to show you how you can efficiently and very low cost enable those capability sets right inside an identity governance platform. This one's coming up more and more, but improving the end user experience. So taking those very difficult to obtain and keep employees throughout the world, making sure their experience is seamless and as easy as possible to accomplish their job is quickly becoming a primary concern in most organizations. You'll see inside the product that we're pushing out some previously very difficult IT tasks out to the business user in a simple to consume format. This helps not only accomplish what they want to accomplish and see the things they want to see, but it also does so in a format that does not upset them or drive them a bit crazy. Definitely increasing the security posture. As the organization gets more complex, you do have an opportunity to increase your overall security posture. Identity governance was built around this. The capability to not only initially make sure people only have the correct access, but also through sustainment of those users and an ongoing governance process, ensure that they just have the access they need ongoing to accomplish their jobs, no more, no less, and giving them the ability to request things if they need it is a key part of the organization's success. Obviously, the reduction of IT support costs. There are certain functions we're going to show you today that can be very challenging to your organization. Enabling that through a platform that's already very identity-aware of all the systems, all the access, and the ways people can have access in the organization gives you some capability sets you might not have today. And we're seeing this one extremely commonly, but helping the organization prepare for and perform mergers and acquisitions is definitely a very often requested thing with identity governance. Imagine this. Imagine being able to look at, consume, or model the impact of moving a large number of people into or out of your organization, looking at how that might impact different licensing models for the application stacks that you have, how you would merge accounts from one system to the other using attributes. All those things are extremely difficult to do in their native environments, but Identity Governance Administration provides you that centralized platform to automate a great deal of those tasks. Now, let's move on. SailPoint's Identity Governance was architected for the cloud and gives you visibility across all users, all applications, and data. We provide about 100 out-of-the-box connectors. We also provide a best-of-breed approach to integrating with your existing IT infrastructure. For example, in this demo, we're going to look at CyberArk, a couple other connectors as well, that we see commonly amongst different enterprises. These integrations provide visibility, so we know all the access people have, and they provide additional security to organization. So with this, I'm going to show you what we commonly see when we talk to somebody, and we're going to create a fictitious organization that's based on some very common ones we run into. Integration with access management is key. This access management world is sometimes called SSO, MFA, bleeds over a little bit across those technologies, and there's 4 or 5 major vendors in that space that we deal with on a regular basis. An integration there is really key. As we're giving people access to systems and changing access to those systems, potentially removing them, we need to make sure that's reflected on their landing page inside the access management platforms. PAM vendors, privileged access management, another key integration point for us. As we're looking at a single source of truth of all of your access, both current and historical, we also need to be aware of the access, in this case very commonly privileged access, you might have through a piece of application like a PAM vendor. That will not natively show inside your application access rights inside the underlying applications. You're only granted that through that PAM vendor. So having a deep integration with the PAM vendors so we're aware of the different access you have into those projects is key to fully understanding all the access you have. IT service management is another very common integration point. We'll pick on ServiceNow. But there are several vendors here as well. At a bare minimum, creating the metrics of the functionality that we're doing when we're granting, taking away, changing access for people across the enterprise, so the metrics are on that end, is key. But also deeper integrations are sometimes required. For example, often we want somebody inside that ITSM platform to be able to enact our capability set without ever realizing they've ever left their particular ITSM platform. They're enacting access requests on our end, performing SOD violation checks, making sure the approval steps are taken, and tracking everything in their identity cubes on our end to make sure we're aware of exactly how this went down. SIM vendors, GRC, Yuba, very similar. Integration with those is key. As an example, integration with SIM vendors is very helpful. We can easily obtain information about last logon and last activity dates for users using certain kinds of access. That can be key in helping somebody decide whether or not somebody should keep their access or not. The last specific thing we'll talk about is deployment methodologies. The vast majority of our deployments are being deployed in the cloud, one form or another. So things like Rackspace or using a partner that hosts it in some sort of way inside the cloud is the vast majority of the ways our customers consume our particular functionality stack. Also, we see people just pure SaaS. We have those options as well. But that deployment methodology is something that we work with our prospective customers to decide upon. So what are we trying to say here? We need analytics and context-based governance inside each one of these applications. We need to be aware of these applications that kind of live in a tertiary world to ours, and we need to fully interact with them. We do that by having an open identity platform. What does that mean? This is not a one-way street. As we are aware of things and interact with access management, PAM vendors, ITSM, GRC, SIM, etc., they're also using our data. For instance, we'll pick on that SIM again. As an alert may happen on the boundary of your organization, the username may tell you some basic information about their IP address. It also may give you some information about what their username is on that application or on that firewall or on the network. But it lacks information about who you are. Are you a contractor or an employee? Who's your manager? What department do you work for? What's the history of your access? All that information can be obtained from us to enhance alerts on that side so that when you do have a serious event occur, you have a lot more information with which to work with. As I mentioned before, architected for the cloud. Our deployments by the vast majority are deployed to the cloud. Also, being able to integrate into cloud applications is key for us. So you'll see that we don't just work with on-premise applications, we often integrate to ones that are in the cloud. And this is sort of our motto. We want to make sure that when we govern identities, it's all your applications, all your data, which we'll look at in depth in a little bit, and all the different kinds of users throughout your enterprise. So for the demo, we're going to use 3 different actors. Our first one's going to be Jerry Bennett. He's an IT risk manager. He oversees the whole identity governance program. SailPoint is a risk-based identity governance platform, and it provides him the visibility and controls to help manage his complex IT environment. Now, why does visibility matter? It gives you context. You need context in order to define the right controls. Let me give you an example. Should a user have access to the corporate mergers and acquisitions SharePoint site? Without context, we kind of don't know. However, if we knew the user was an employee with a job title Senior Mergers and Acquisitions Advisor, we know this is probably appropriate access. But if the user was a contractor with an expired contract, we know this is most likely nefarious and we need to take some immediate action. In order for us to enable businesses to maintain controls, we've also asked a manager to get involved. In this case, we'll use somebody called Amanda Ross. She'll manage the access of her direct reports. The manager is going to be asked to approve her employees' access in a simple, mobile-enabled UI. She'll also be asked to do periodic reviews of all of her employees' access. And last but not least, we'll look and see how we enable the end users to maintain their appropriate access that they need to do their job. We'll also highlight how controls of the Identity Governance Program will help your organization maintain compliance, even as the organization changes. My job today is to show you how SailPoint will help enable your organization to manage this complexity in a way that reduces risks, makes you more secure, and more compliant and efficient. So, without looking at any more slides, let's take a look at product. So first, we're going to start as that Jerry Bennett, that IT security manager, the person in charge of the identity management and governance project here. A couple of things to note that are of interest in here. One is, when we talk about all users, let's show you what that means. Certainly employees are a very common type, and they often come in through an HR source. That's their system of record. However, different users very commonly come in different ways. We see users come in 3 to 5 different sources into most systems out there, into most organizations. An example of a tertiary type users you might not think about are RPAs or bots. We need to make sure we manage these as well. These RPAs or bots have capability sets. They have rights. They often have elevated rights. They often have a group or a person responsible for them as well. They need to be reviewed like every other identity out there. Sometimes their task is long done, but they still exist out there. This can be and is typically a very common security threat with which nefarious people can use to gain access to the enterprise. For that reason, they need to be looked at. Other examples of users might be contractors, vendors, etc. But we see many different kinds of users being included inside an identity governance platform. As I mentioned before, I also want to show you how we're getting access from these privileged access management providers, the PAM vendors. In this case, we're picking on CyberArk. But as we look into the integration point for our PAM integration, we can see all the projects that exist through our PAM vendor. I'm going to pick on this one called Project X because it has a person that we're going to be using later on in the demonstration. So you'll see here that we are aware Catherine Simmons has some access to this particular project. I can look at information about her access, her history, all right here within the application. In addition, when I look at Catherine Simmons as an identity, this particular information is included along with her other pieces of access to both systems and data. This is key for us to understand and to go forward with maintaining exactly what type of access people have. So without further ado, let's take a look at what these identities actually look like. We call this structure a cube, but an identity cube in our world is simply a conglomeration of all the information that we've gathered about the user. And here's what it typically looks like. These are some attributes that we pulled about Catherine Simmons from our authoritative source. She's an employee, so most likely this came in through HR. We'll pick on Workday. So as she's created in Workday, we automatically see the change. We pull on the attributes. In particular, we love using the manager field. You'll see why in a little bit. And we use those attributes to create some common, useful, day one access this person could use to accomplish their job. And then we enable them and their manager to request additional access should they need it. But Catherine Simmons has been around for a little while. So we're going to take a look at all the different information we've stored about her. Here are some of the attributes that we've stored. This is certainly not all that we pulled in from the authoritative source from Workday. We pulled in quite a bit else, but these are some of the ones we chose to expose on the screen. We're aware of all of her accounts. This is pretty interesting. You'll see in particular in my EBS system, maybe that username makes sense, maybe it doesn't. However, we're aware that particular account is tied to Catherine Simmons. That's a part of her identity. We're a great centralized location to point which accounts are related to which people. Also, you'll note sometimes people have multiple accounts and systems. A great example of that is an admin account in Active Directory. Catherine has both a regular Active Directory account and an admin account, but they're both tied to Catherine. So we want to make sure we track both of those inside here. You'll also see when we go over to Catherine and she's requesting some additional access on her own behalf, if it requires Active Directory rights, it will ask her which account she would like to request it for. And last but certainly not least, we want to take a look at all the access this person has. We have a concept called roles. And that particular title can mean a lot of things to some different people. In our concept, roles are simply groups of entitlements. And entitlements are capability sets you have on each one of the connected applications. Inside here, we've created some very common roles. This makes it a little bit easier for somebody to request and to approve continuing access for somebody in a consolidated fashion. So this accounts receivable accountant role will likely have many different pieces of access under it that touch many different systems, but it's consolidated into a simple name that we can use to both request, take away, or review on a regular basis. Under those roles, and some ad hoc, we can also see all the individual entitlements that Catherine has. In here, you'll note they traverse many different kinds of applications. It includes my PAM vendor. She has quite a bit of access in the PAM, actually. But it traverses all my different applications. It also traverses access I have to data where sensitive files are stored. I'll show you how that comes about here in a few minutes also. This identity cube structure is extremely beneficial. It not only helps providing that single source of truth for people's access, but it also records all the history. When Catherine got this access, how she got the access, who requested it, who approved it, what are the timestamps. Those are important things for an auditor to know. We also have information about accounts that have been removed. Should Catherine be a past employee, we keep the cube, and all the history of the access she had and the date she had it. This again can be very important not only to auditors, but also to security people inside the organization. Now, let's take a deep dive in something we're going to see later on when we go to the managers, and let's see exactly how we get to the point where we're aware of the type of data Catherine has access to. So SailPoint's File Access Manager is able to crawl all of your storage locations, both on-prem and cloud, and identify where sensitive data it resides. We mark the file and the folders it's contained inside as having that sensitive data, and then we draw back who has access to the file itself, the folder, or any parent folders out there. And as a result, we're able to map back to the identity how they have access and which sensitive files they have access to across the organization. Obviously, once we've crawled that information, we can use it a different way. If this particular person is in charge of their human resources storage folder, he's easily able to come in and take a look at some items he might want to address very quickly. In particular, let's focus on the red one. Inside this storage location, I'm going to change the view a little bit. There are sources here that have some very risky information, some PII, GDPR, EBITDA information, and the Everyone group has been assigned the read, write, and execute permissions on those folders. Likely, somebody put a file out there they did not realize was secure in nature, and it's been put on places where everybody has access. This allows you to not only find, but also address those concerns in a very easy format. However, in particular, later on in the demonstration, you're going to see how this is being used to help a manager understand and approve or reject someone's access that gives them access to files in these sensitive locations. Last but certainly not least, let's look at how we use machine learning and artificial intelligence to help in the endeavors as far as governance is concerned. Here, the AI engine has gone out and created automatic peer groups of people throughout the organization. We've used the entitlements they have to define automatically different groups of people who are very similar in nature from an access perspective. Let's pick on P61 because I know Catherine belongs to this one, and we're going to look at Catherine in depth later. Here's this group that's automatically been created. It's 183 identities. I can look at those if I want. Also, there's 21 items in there that are very unique. So there's 21 entitlements in here that are anomalous from all the other members of this peer group. That's pretty important because we're going to see that later on used. You can see above what the items were that made these people very similar. And then you can come down and take a look at kind of the different types of roles these people have inside the organization. Locations also, department, etc. But it's interesting to take a look at exactly what these peer groups look like. However, how we're going to use this operationally and immediately is knowing that they belong to a peer group and they have some anomalous types of access. So without further ado, let's hop over to the manager and show exactly that. I've switched over to Amanda Ross. Amanda Ross is one of the managers in my organization, but she's a business user, not IT. We've tried our best to make her screen very simple for her to consume to do her most common tasks. She can take a look at her team, take a look at the access they have. She has approvals that are coming to her inbox, often that her direct employees have requested, that require manager approval. Also, she has some certifications in flight. They're also called access reviews or attestation campaigns. Let's take a look at what one of those look like. So since we're going to focus on Catherine Simmons, let's look at the manager's view of her direct report, Catherine Simmons. This is a quarterly review. So every quarter, this business user is required to review the access that her direct reports have. In the past, that was a spreadsheet or an Excel file or something similar that was very tedious to accomplish. Now, this is what it looks like. Should Catherine keep access to the Privileged Access Management project? Approve or revoke? How about the rest of her access? Here, I'm noting this is a privileged account. So this is being given access to Catherine using her Active Directory privileged account. Also down here, you'll see that we can get some information, as I mentioned before, that by granting Catherine access, continued access to this particular group inside Active Directory, it's also giving her access to a file and folder that houses EBITDA and high-risk information, along with PII. That's important to note. We want to make sure the manager is capable of seeing that. Also, there is some access into that CyberArk vendor, right? That PAM application, what type of access does she have? Which project? All that's easily approved in here. Now, using that machine learning, that artificial intelligence, we've gone a step further. Based on Catherine's peers, is this access normal or abnormal? Here, we're able to take a look at the reasons for justifications of a thumbs up or a thumbs down. In this case, it's very common for all the peer groups Catherine belongs to that she have this access. And here are the justifications for keeping it. This will assist managers to come through and quickly decide what are likely things that they should approve. Consequently, we have an item down here that is not recommended. This is one of those anomalous pieces of access that Catherine has amongst the different peer groups she belongs to. At a bare minimum, this would require some additional investigation, but very likely a candidate for me to take a look at and decide that should be revoked for her. But at this point in time, I'm able to simply save my decisions and be done with Catherine's review in a very simple and concise manner that managers can easily understand. This allows them to accomplish this task quickly, regularly, and all this information is permanently stored in Catherine's cube, so you have information about this for both security personnel and the auditors permanently. So last, let's switch over and look at the end users themselves. Here's Catherine Simmons. As we mentioned before, you'll see she has quite a bit less on her screen. She's able to take a look at her personal requests, what all the histories were behind that. So she can certainly take a look at the story behind everything that's gone on. But she's also able to look at her existing access, reset passwords, manage access if she wants to request more, etc. In this case, I want to show you what it looks like for somebody to request some additional access. Now, Catherine has some sub-reports. These are the people that report under her and herself. Today, we're just going to focus on her. But if you want to work with multiple, we certainly could. A very common method businesses use, or they think like, that is not typically a very good security practice, is basing someone's access off of someone else's and copying it. It's typically a horrible security practice. However, it's often hard to get them to change the way they think. We have enabled this capability set with some security boundaries. For instance, inside here, I can try to mimic the access request that I'm going to give to her based on another user, Denise Hunt. Here's all the access Denise Hunt has. But instead of granting everything and copying that access, I'm able to come through here and ad hoc select the items I think might be appropriate for me to request for Catherine Simmons. And again, if it requires an Active Directory account in this case, and I know that Catherine has multiple Active Directory accounts, it can request which one I think is appropriate for it to be granted to. Once people become more familiar with the SailPoint identity governance platform, they often switch over to here. So what's common for her peers? She belongs in the finance group. What's common for other finance people? As a group, I have 5 of them. Which things are kind of common to be requestable inside that group? For instance, inside here, how many people have this treasury capability set? I can click in here and see the 2 that do, or the 3 that don't. But I'm able to quickly define which things are very common for other similar users out there. Again, I can choose which type of access I want Catherine to get. As I build my shopping cart, I'm going to show you one more way to do it, and that is often a manager says, I want you to get a specific kind of access, go search for it, and request it. In this case, we're going to have her request an accounts payable approval. Inside that is an optional nested role. We can choose whether or not she wants to request that optional nested role inside there. When we're done, we can go to the shopping cart. There's a couple of items in here that are worth pointing out. One is I can see everything that I've requested. Also, if there's going to be an approval step, I can see where that approval is going to go. Also, I can make comments. If I want to request a reason or justification for this access, I can here. Both the approver and my identity cube will permanently see this information about the reason I requested this access. Also, I can set sunset dates and start dates if I wish. So if I'm filling in for somebody or this is a special need, I can set the sunset dates immediately. When I'm done, I click Submit, and this will go through an approval process, an SOD check, and permanently stamp this information about this request inside Catherine's cube. That information helps us keep a clear understanding of the history of this user throughout their lifecycle. That's it in a nutshell. I hope you had some great information you learned today. If you have any additional questions, stick on the line. We're going to take some questions at the end of the call and do our best to answer them. But as always, we appreciate your time and we hope to talk to you soon.